Hartford Civic Center, Connecticut, September 30th, 1988. Outside, autumn was painting the New England landscape in brilliant hues of amber and crimson, but inside the massive arena, 20,000 people existed in a different reality altogether, a reality shaped by rhythm, light, and the promise of witnessing greatness. The Bad World Tour had been underway for nearly a year, breaking attendance records across 3 continents. Tonight's show had been sold out for months, with some fans camping outside ticket offices for days when sales were first announced. Now, they sat in hushed anticipation, the air around them almost vibrating with collective excitement. The scent of perfume, cologne, and expectation mingled in the air. Strangers exchanged knowing glances, united by the awareness that they were about to share something extraordinary. The lights had dimmed 15 minutes ago, plunging the arena into a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow sound itself. Occasionally, a technician's flashlight would briefly illuminate a small section as final preparations were made, causing ripples of excitement to surge through the crowd before darkness reclaimed its dominion. Anticipation had built to an almost unbearable pitch when the first synthesizer notes of "Wanna Be Startin' Something" exploded through the sound system, followed by a perfectly timed array of spotlights that crisscrossed the stage in a dazzling geometric pattern. The crowd erupted into a roar that physically pushed against the eardrums as Michael Jackson materialized at center stage, his silhouette instantly recognizable even before the full lights revealed him in his iconic Bad Tour outfit. Black buckled jacket, matching pants with strips of silver tape, and a single white glove that caught and scattered light like a handheld constellation. For the next hour and a half, Michael commanded the stage with supernatural precision. Each movement, each note, each carefully choreographed sequence executed with such perfection that it seemed to exist outside the realm of human capability. The audience was entranced, caught in the spell of witnessing something they intrinsically understood they would measure all future experiences against. Behind Michael, 8 dancers moved in perfect synchronization, each an exceptional performer in their own right, but collectively forming a living backdrop that amplified and enhanced Michael's own brilliance. Among them was Thomas Rivera, at 22 the youngest member of the dance troupe. Thomas had been discovered during auditions in Los Angeles, where his blend of classical training and street dance innovation had immediately caught the attention of choreographers. This was his first major tour, his first time performing before crowds of this magnitude. While the veteran dancers had grown somewhat accustomed to the scale of these performances, Thomas still experienced each show with wide-eyed wonder, sometimes visibly fighting to control his expressions during particularly enthusiastic audience responses. As Smooth Criminal concluded, Michael executing the famous forward lean that still defied logical explanation, the stage fell into momentary darkness for a set change. The dancers had exactly 45 seconds to exit stage right, change costume elements, and prepare for their next entrance. It was a precisely choreographed backstage dance that happened in near darkness, guided by muscle memory and the occasional glow of a stagehand's red filter flashlight. Thomas hurried along the narrow corridor behind the stage, his breath coming in controlled bursts as he mentally prepared for the quick costume change. He had removed his fedora and was reaching for the suit jacket hanging on his assigned quick change rack when something unusual caught his attention. In the dim backstage light, a security guard was speaking with increased frustration to a young woman who appeared to be in her late teens. What struck Thomas as unusual wasn't the presence of the fan. Security was constantly dealing with audience members who attempted to access backstage areas, but rather the way she was responding, her hands moving rapidly in what he immediately recognized as American Sign Language. The security guard's frustration was evident. He kept speaking louder, as if volume could somehow bridge the communication gap. The young woman's expression was a mixture of determination and growing distress. Thomas hesitated. He had exactly 32 seconds before he needed to be in position for his next entrance. The veteran dancers had drummed into him the cardinal rule of the tour. Nothing, absolutely nothing, interrupted the clockwork precision of the show. To miss a cue was unforgivable. But something about the young woman's expression pulled at him. Thomas made a split-second decision. He approached quickly, his costume change momentarily forgotten. "Excuse me," he said to the security guard. "I can't help." Without waiting for a response, Thomas turned to the young woman and signed, "Hello. Are you okay? Can I help?" The transformation in her face was immediate and profound. Relief, surprise, and gratitude washed over her features in quick succession. Her hands moved rapidly in response, explaining that she had won a contest through a deaf community organization. The prize was supposed to include a backstage meet and greet with the dancers, but something had gone wrong with the communication. Her interpreter hadn't been allowed backstage, and now she was stuck, unable to explain who she was or why she was there. Thomas nodded, understanding, his own hands moving with the fluidity that came from growing up with two deaf parents. He explained to the security guard, who looked both relieved and slightly embarrassed. "She's supposed to be here. She won a contest. Her paperwork is probably at the front entrance with her interpreter." 20 seconds, hissed another dancer who was rushing past. Thomas felt the pressure of time bearing down on him. He quickly signed to the young woman, whose name, she told him, was Melissa, that he had to go on stage now, but would return after the next number. "Just wait right here," he signed, his movements emphasizing the importance of her staying put. "I promise I'll come back." With that, Thomas sprinted to his quick change rack, threw on his jacket without checking if it was properly aligned, and barely made it to his mark as the lights came up for "The Way You Make Me Feel." What Thomas couldn't know, was that from the shadowed recess of a backstage equipment area, Michael Jackson had witnessed the entire exchange. Michael had been using the brief darkness to take an extra sip of water and clear his throat, one of the tiny, unscheduled moments he carved out for himself within the rigid structure of the show. Hidden from general view by speakers and lighting equipment, he'd observed the young dancer choosing to help rather than prioritizing his costume change. He'd watched the transformation on the deaf girl's face when someone finally communicated in her language. And though no one could see it in the darkness, Michael's expression had changed too, a look of thoughtful consideration replacing the intense focus that typically characterized him during performances. On stage, Thomas danced with the precision expected of him, but his mind kept returning to Melissa waiting backstage. He wondered if she was still there, if she was enjoying the show, if she could feel the music, even if she couldn't hear it. As the number concluded and the dancers exited for the next costume change, Thomas moved with renewed purpose. He had 8 minutes during Michael's solo performance of Human Nature to fulfill his promise. He found Melissa exactly where he'd left her, her expression lighting up when she saw him return. Through rapid signs, he learned that she'd been a Michael Jackson fan for years, studying videos of his performances and learning to dance by feeling the vibrations of his music through specially designed floors at her school for the deaf. She'd entered the contest never expecting to win, and now couldn't believe she was actually backstage. "Can you feel the music from here?" Thomas signed, curious about her experience. Melissa nodded enthusiastically, explaining that the bass vibrations came through the floor and walls, giving her a physical connection to the rhythm. She demonstrated how she counted beats by feeling the pulsations through her feet. Thomas was so engaged in the conversation that he almost missed his next cue. A stagehand frantically waved at him, and he quickly signed to Melissa, "I have to go again, but meet me right here after the show. I'll make sure you get to meet everyone as promised." As Thomas hurried away, he didn't notice Michael's personal assistant watching the exchange with interest, nor did he see her approach Michael during the brief moment he left the stage for his major costume change. The remainder of the show unfolded with the precision audiences had come to expect from a Michael Jackson performance. Each song, each dance sequence, each special effect executed with flawless attention to detail. When the final encore concluded and Michael took his last bow, 20,000 people remained on their feet, applauding and cheering as if they could somehow extend the magic through the sheer force of their appreciation. Backstage, the energy was different, but no less intense. Dancers and technicians moved with practiced efficiency, beginning the complex process of dismantling and packing the massive production for transport to the next city. Thomas, still buzzing with performance adrenaline, quickly changed into his street clothes and made his way to the spot where he'd asked Melissa to meet him. To his relief, she was still there, her expression a mixture of patience and barely contained excitement. "I'm going to try to find someone from management to help us," Thomas signed. "You should get the full backstage experience you were promised." Before he could move to find assistance, one of Michael's personal security team approached. "Thomas Rivera?" the man asked, his expression professionally neutral. Thomas nodded, suddenly concerned. Had someone reported his backstage interaction with Melissa? Had he violated some protocol he wasn't aware of? "Mr. Jackson would like to see you and your guest in his private dressing room," the security guard continued, gesturing for them to follow. Thomas stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what he'd just heard. In the 10 months he'd been on tour, he'd had exactly 3 brief interactions with Michael, all of them in group settings with the other dancers, all of them professionally focused on performance notes. The idea that Michael Jackson, in the immediate aftermath of a show when his privacy was most fiercely protected, wanted to see him, and had somehow known about Melissa, seemed impossible to comprehend. Thomas turned to Melissa, his hands signing almost automatically as his mind struggled to catch up with this unexpected development. "Michael Jackson wants to meet us," he signed, his movements conveying his own disbelief. Melissa's eyes widened, her hands flying in excited questions that Thomas could barely keep up with. The security guard, noticing their exchange, waited patiently before leading them through a series of increasingly restricted backstage areas. They finally arrived at a door marked simply with an M, guarded by 2 additional security personnel who nodded and stepped aside after a brief communication through their headsets. The dressing room they entered bore little resemblance to the utilitarian spaces assigned to the dancers and other performers. This was a fully realized environment designed to provide its occupant with both physical and psychological comfort before and after the intense demands of performance. The lighting was soft and indirect, the temperature precisely controlled. Fresh flowers arranged in simple, elegant displays added color and a subtle fragrance. And there, sitting in a comfortable chair, while a stylist gently blotted the performance sweat from his face with a white towel, was Michael Jackson. "Thomas," Michael said, his speaking voice so much softer than his powerful stage presence would suggest. "Please come in. And this must be Melissa." Thomas was too stunned to question how Michael knew her name. He simply nodded, then remembered to sign Michael's greeting to Melissa, whose expression had transformed into one of absolute wonder. Michael dismissed the stylist with a gentle, "Thank you. We'll continue later," and stood to greet them properly. To Thomas's surprise, Michael's hands moved in simple but clear sign language. "Hello. I'm happy to meet you." The signs were basic and somewhat stiff, clearly those of someone who had learned just enough for this specific interaction, but the effect on Melissa was electric. Tears immediately filled her eyes, and her hands trembled as she signed back a greeting. Thomas automatically began to translate aloud for Michael, but Michael shook his head slightly. "I asked Janet to teach me a few phrases while I was changing for Billie Jean," he explained. "I don't understand everything, but I'd like you to teach me how to say something properly." He turned his attention fully to Melissa, making sure she could see his lips clearly as he spoke. "I saw what happened backstage earlier. I saw Thomas help you when others didn't understand." Thomas translated this into sign language, still processing the revelation that Michael had witnessed the earlier interaction. Michael continued, his gaze shifting between Melissa and Thomas to include them both in the conversation. That moment, that simple act of stopping to communicate with someone in their own language, that's more important than any perfectly executed dance step. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more untold moments that reveal the compassion behind the legend, the human connections that happen away for the spotlight, but tell us more about who Michael Jackson truly was than any headline ever could. Michael moved to a small table and picked up what appeared to be a program from the show, open to the center spread that featured photos of the dancers. "I noticed something about you during auditions," he said to Thomas. "You dance with your whole soul, not just your body. There's a difference. I can teach someone steps, but I can't teach them to feel music the way you do." Thomas stood speechless, overwhelmed by the personal observation from the person he considered the greatest performer who had ever lived. Michael turned his attention back to Melissa, gesturing for Thomas to translate. "I understand you want a contest to meet the dancers. I hope we can make that experience even better than what was promised." He pressed a button on a small intercom, and within moments his assistant entered. After a brief, quiet exchange, the assistant left, only to return minutes later with a photographer and, to Melissa's visible delight, her interpreter who had been waiting at the venue's entrance. What followed was an extraordinary half-hour that defied every protocol of the tightly controlled post-show process. One by one, the dancers were brought to Michael's dressing room, introduced to Melissa, and included in photos. Michael's personal photographer documented everything, while the tour's ASL interpreter ensured Melissa could fully participate in the conversations. Throughout, Michael observed with quiet satisfaction, occasionally asking Thomas to teach him another simple sign, which he would then practice until he felt confident using it with Melissa. As the impromptu gathering began to wind down, Michael asked everyone except Thomas, Melissa, and her interpreter to give them a final moment of privacy. From a carefully packed case, he removed something wrapped in tissue paper. "This is for you," he said to Melissa as Thomas signed. "To remember tonight." Melissa unwrapped the package with trembling fingers to reveal a single white glove, not a replica or merchandise item, but one of Michael's actual performance gloves, the crystals still catching the light with every slight movement. "This glove has been part of many performances," Michael explained through Thomas's translation. "It's seen many audiences, heard many songs. Now I'd like it to experience the world through your hands, which speak their own beautiful language." Melissa's tears flowed freely now, her hands temporarily stilled by emotion before she managed to sign her profound gratitude. Thomas, translating her response, found himself fighting his own tears. "There's one more thing," Michael said, his expression becoming more serious. "Thomas, I'd like you to teach me and the other dancers a song in sign language. Not just a few words, but an entire song. We'll perform it at the end of every show for the rest of the tour." Thomas looked at him in surprise. "Which song?" he asked. "Man in the Mirror," Michael replied without hesitation. "The message is too important to be limited to those who can hear it. I want everyone to understand that change begins within each of us." The tour schedule was already demanding beyond reason, with every minute accounted for. The idea of adding sign language rehearsals for the entire dance troupe seemed logistically impossible. Yet something in Michael's expression made it clear this wasn't a casual suggestion, but a decision already made. When Thomas, Melissa, and her interpreter finally left the dressing room, they were met by the tour's choreographer, who already had a notepad out, ready to schedule the first teaching session for the following afternoon. The story might have ended there, a beautiful moment of connection, a generous gift, a commitment to greater inclusivity, and still been worthy of telling. But what happened over the next 2 months transformed it from a private interaction into something that touched millions. Thomas began teaching the dancers basic ASL the very next day, starting with the chorus of Man in the Mirror. Michael attended every session, often arriving early and staying late, his focus intense as he worked to ensure his signing was precise and expressive. Melissa was invited to several rehearsals, her feedback incorporated as they refined the performance. The first time they performed the song with the added sign language element was in Boston, 2 weeks after the Hartford show. As the familiar opening notes played, Michael stepped forward and made a simple announcement. "Tonight, we're trying something new. We want everyone to understand our music, not just those who can hear it." The crowd watched in surprised appreciation as Michael and the dancers performed the chorus in ASL while singing, their hands moving in beautiful synchronization with the music. What no one expected was how quickly this new element would spread beyond the confines of the concert venues. Audience members began learning the signs themselves, prompted by video screens that now displayed simplified guides during the song. At each subsequent show, more and more audience members participated, until arenas across America featured thousands of hands moving in unison during the chorus, a visual manifestation of music that could be heard even in silence. News outlets picked up the story. Deaf community organizations reported unprecedented interest in ASL classes. Schools for the deaf received surprise donations for music and vibration equipment, each gift accompanied by a single white feather. Michael's subtle signature, never publicly acknowledged but understood by those who needed to know. For the final American show of the tour, Michael arranged for 500 deaf children and their families to attend, with special seating designed to maximize their ability to feel the music's vibrations. Interpreters were positioned throughout their sections. The lighting was adjusted to ensure the sign portions were clearly visible. But the most powerful moment came during Man in the Mirror, when Michael invited Melissa, no longer a shy fan, but now a regular presence at rehearsals and an important consultant on the tour's accessibility initiatives, to join him on stage. Together, they led both the hearing and deaf audience members in signing the chorus, creating a powerful visual of hands moving in unity across the arena. Backstage, after that final show, Michael presented Thomas with a small box. Inside was a pin in the shape of hands forming the ASL sign for "Thank You," crafted in white gold and subtle diamonds that caught the light just enough to be noticeable without being ostentatious. "For reminding me why we really do this," Michael said simply. "Not for the records or the awards or even the performances themselves. We do this to connect, to speak to each other across all the barriers that would keep us apart." Thomas wore that pin on stage for every performance of his subsequent 30-year career as a dancer, choreographer, and eventually founder of the first major dance company to fully integrate deaf and hearing dancers. In interviews, when asked about his remarkable success and innovative approach to dance, he would touch the pin and smile, saying only, "I had a good teacher, someone who understood that the most important performance happens when no one is watching, when you think it doesn't count, when helping one person seems small compared to entertaining thousands." The white glove Michael gave to Melissa found its way to the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, part of an exhibition on performing arts and accessibility. Beside it, a simple placard tells the story of a shy dancer who greeted a deaf fan using sign language, unaware that Michael Jackson was quietly watching behind him, and how that small moment of human connection rippled outward to touch countless lives. Near the exhibit stand a life-size photograph of Michael and his dancers performing Man in the Mirror, with their hands speaking as clearly as their voices, a visual testament to the power of inclusive art and the difference one person can make when they choose to truly see and hear another human being, even when that hearing must be done with the eyes and heart rather than the ears. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of small kindnesses, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that reveal the man behind the legend. Because sometimes the most powerful spotlight isn't the one on stage, but the light we shine on others when we choose to communicate with them in their own language, whatever that language might be.